Hello there, everyone. Join me as I dive into some of the wildest revenge stories from Reddit. And why not try to guess how each one of them ends in the comments below? I bet you can. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and let's get started, shall we? 401k with a side of revenge. Someone suggested I post this story over here. Enjoy. When our first child was born, my ex forced me to quit my job. When our second child was 2, I found out about his affair. By the time, he was extremely verbally, emotionally, and sometimes physically abusive. When he abused our firstborn, I put him out. That was in 2012. I couldn't afford daycare to work and had no family or support. He refused to give me any money to take care of the kids, saying, "The courts haven't ordered me to give you a dime." He lied to the bank and had my accounts frozen, and even assaulted me when I filed for default in the divorce. The judge finally ordered him to pay child support 6 months after I kicked him out. It was $2,562 a month. He refused to pay it until the garnishment kicked in, and by then he was already $6,000 behind in support. I used that to get permission to move away. I remarried a year after the divorce. I checked in the court documents and there was a little box that said spousal support stopped upon remarriage if that box was checked. It wasn't checked, so I figured I was good. Instead of filing for his retirement, I just took that year of spousal support, $1,200,000, and left it alone. Spousal support was only ordered for 2 years. In 2017, he's filed for sole custody of the kids out of nowhere. And that was where we found out that I had remarried and he had paid spousal support to me during the first year of my marriage. I told him I took that money instead of filing for my share of his retirement. I said if he let me keep that $12,000, I wouldn't file to split his 401k. He demanded I repay the spousal support. The judge ordered me to repay it, but increased child support and deducted the repayment from that. It ended up that I got an extra $20 a month, and he repaid himself. He dropped his bid for custody in exchange for 2 extra weeks in summer. I pursued the retirement account split. He refused to cooperate and dragged it out for 4 years. It was so bad, they sanctioned him and he had to pay me $600 a month for a year in addition to child support. They also charged him with contempt of court. In January 2021, he proposed to his girlfriend. In May of 2021, I finally got the disbursement from his 401k. I won't say how much it was, but it was about 4 times the amount of spousal support overpayment. I had no idea it would be that much. I'd thought it'd be around $1,200, which is why I thought of keeping that year of spousal and not filing for his retirement account, which I thought was a fair trade. Had he not tried to take the kids from me, I would have never filed to split the account. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. His fiancée emailed me recently and told me it's my fault he won't marry her because I cleaned out his retirement account. She said I shouldn't have, quote unquote, stolen his money. I told her that I gave him the option to let me keep that year of spousal support or take it back and I could file for his retirement. He chose to have me file for his retirement. I told her that if he really wanted to marry her and protect his assets, they could get a prenup so he wouldn't have to worry about it. She said she shouldn't have to sign a prenup because I robbed him. I never asked to be financially dependent on him. He clearly indicated he wanted a court order to take care of his kids. So I got him one. I tried to be fair and take the lesser amount by taking the spousal support and not filing for his retirement. He wouldn't let me. In summary, my ex refused to pay me until spousal support orders dropped, refused to pay until they had revoked his license, tried to get me in trouble for accepting spousal support over payment, and in the end it cost him a lot of money out of his 401k. Looks like karma cashed in his 401k. Oh, you'll love to see it. On to the next story. So sue me. Okay, well, sure can do. I originally posted this story in malicious compliance, and a few were saying it should be great here and at r/nuclear revenge. I'm a military veteran who was injured in Iraq. I mention only because it's important to the story. I worked for this company. Well, I say company, but in reality, it was a guy who owned a few businesses, and he was the richest person for a very small town. It's important to say how I made it into this situation. I'll try and make it quick so I can get to the steak and taters, as it were. I joined the military before I even completed high school, late birthdays, and all of that. I chose a military career that I figured I would enjoy. Since I loved working on things, I became a mechanic. So I offered a great sign-on bonus, so that was a bonus. I went through basic, only ever spending money on necessities. So, saved up quite a lot. Saved up even more through advanced training for my military job. By the time I was done with both, I had half my sign-on bonus and just short of an entire year's pay in my bank account. At my age, most would have splurged, but I invested in the stock market. Bitcoin paid off at my parents' house. A couple of deployments on the other half of my bonus. And the only thing I really spent money on outside of necessities was my hot rod. Needless to say, I had some money saved up and invested it also. Long story short, when I discharged, I was pretty comfortable even after a nasty divorce. Don't get me wrong, I didn't and don't have stupid money, but because of the divorces, a lot of stocks were cashed out and split. And if anyone follows Bitcoin over the past 2 decades, you know how that turned out. After my divorce, I worked to recover what I lost, and then just to keep busy. Like I said, I love working as a mechanic and would bounce around wherever I felt like, since a good mechanic can make money anywhere. After a decade of this, I decided to set roots in a small town since it would be nice and quiet. By this point, I was tired of always working on other people's cars and wanted to devote time working on my car. I bought a small house and saw a help wanted sign at the local lube shop. Figured it'd be simple work for me and something to cover my new expenses. I grabbed an application from the office, getting all kinds of looks from the townies. By the way, I'm 6 foot 3 inches. Since I discharged from the military. I stopped cutting my hair and shaving, and have one of those full sleeves. Needless to say, most people cross the street instead of walk past. When I went to turn in my application to, we will call her Sue the bookkeeper, she asked me a couple of questions and noticed that I checked that I was a veteran and puts a Y on my application. Later that day, Sue calls me and asks if I would come back to meet the owner. Let's call him Peter. I agree, and Sue says Peter will be there in an hour or so. So if I come in then, we could talk about the position. I show up and Peter's eyes bulge out at first sight of me, but we get to chatting and my southern charm wins him over. He tossed me a calendar that he had made of his car collection and asked me to name each of the ones I recognized. There were a couple of Mustangs, a Ford GT, a Bricklin SV, a Judge, a Demon, a Pantera, and an MXT. He was more impressed that I knew what an SV1 was, and we chatted cars for a bit. He offered me the position and explained that I would be paid $100 a day, and that I would work Monday from Saturday to 8 to 6, no overtime, but I would get a full day's pay even if we closed shop early for some reason, and eat when I could. I would be off every Sunday and would work one extra day during the week. Awesome. Start and work maybe a year with no issues. Peter asks if I could help him out by being a relief worker for his other lube shops in neighboring towns. He says he'll give me $20 each day for travel, and basically I would be covering so guys could take days off at the other stores. I agreed and did this for about a year, but then disaster strikes. Peter meets Karen and falls madly in love in the span of a month. They are married, and he starts supporting her and her gambling problem. And this is when all the problems start. 1 week, I noticed my paycheck was only $250 and ask about it. Sue tells me apparently there have been some changes and I should really speak to Peter about it. Sure, no problem. I call up Peter and ask if we could talk about something. He shows up with Karen in tow, and when I ask him why my pay was short, he tells me it was because of bad weather and us closing early affected the business. I would have let it go at that point because Peter was a nice guy, but Karen decided to speak.
It isn't very fair of us to have to pay you for a full day if you don't work the full 10 hours.
I said that would be true if I wasn't on a negotiated day rate, and if I get paid for each day, I work not hourly, and that's why I don't get paid 19 hours overtime each week. She claims that's not how it works anymore, and from now on, I would be paid for the hours I worked, and nothing else. Okay, whatever you say, Karen. Fast forward to the next week, we have a week's worth of very busy days where we open a couple hours later than normal to finish up with the waiting customers. And I gave up one of my days to cover for a sick coworker. So when what should have been easily over an $800 paycheck was only $600, I had some questions. I called Peter over and asked him what was going on and why he only got paid $600, and he says that's what we agreed on, $100 a day. I look at him blankly and ask if he forgot about last week, and he asked what about it. I reminded him, and he just says, "It is what it is." Okay, so at this point, I'm aggravated, and that's when Karen walks in and asks what he's bitching about now. I look at her coldly and say, "Well, I worked 80 hours last week and y'all only paid me $600. She looks at me and says,
You're contracted labor and you agreed to do $100 per day, so why should we pay you more than that?
I look at Peter and ask, "Is this how it's going to be?" And he just says, "You heard the lady." I went home and convinced myself I was only working to cover my few living expenses anyway, and the job isn't that hard. The only things in this small town would have been assembling sheds or slinging chickens at a chicken plant. The next week, one of the guys I work with is getting yelled at in front of customers by Karen about what she claims is an OSHA violation. She claims that as part of owner of the company, it is her responsibility to ensure that OSHA regulations are met, and his apparent violation was him wearing tinted safety glasses. Now this is BS because the bays faced east-west, and with how the cars pulled in, top workers got the sun during the day, and the pit worker got it in the evening. I shake my head as I'm walking in, and like a T-Rex in a dinosaur movie, it attracted Karen's attention, and she decides to shout at me,
You got something to say, you big bitch.
and I just kept walking. I told Sue she needs to have a long talk with Peter before Karen's mouth wrote checks he would have to cash, and she says,
I just keep the books, don't involve me.
So this behavior goes on another year, and finally I'm at my limit. On the day I start my malicious compliance, I am in a very bad mood. I had woken up to news that a good friend of mine, that was responsible for me surviving being blown up in Iraq, was taken out by a drunk driver. Not wanting to deal with anyone, I tell the shop I'll be working pit all day, and to just let me be these guys have been working with me for a few years now, and know something is up. I never once thought that this would be a day I would need to deal with Karen since I was working at the further shop from the main shop, and it was in the opposite direction of the casinos, but I wasn't so lucky, or maybe I was. Peter and Karen show up and she storms into the pit and screams,
Peter, come look at this mess.
I have no idea what she's talking about because I always kept the place spotless and would clean as I worked. There were a lot of others that would clean at the end of the day. Her complaint was about 50 of the most common oil filters we use in a day being stacked on my waste drum for easy access to me, so I wouldn't have to wait to the top guys to hand me filters. I did this all the time, and Peter knew about it and never cared before. He comes down, looks around, and tells me like he's talking to a teenager, "Clean this up, pigsty." I shake my head and say, "Today's not the day, Peter. Move on and take her with you." This apparently infuriated Karen, who of course thought it was the utmost disrespect to her and Peter. She tells me if I don't like it, I'm free to leave, so I left. Now don't freak out, this story isn't over yet. It's just at the first flap of the butterfly's wings. That started a massive storm. The next day, Peter calls me and asks me to swing by the main store on my way home. I think he's going to apologize about the day before. Figured one of the other guys might have told him why I was so on edge. No, that's not what it was about. Peter was calling me in to inform me that for the next 6 months, I would be on a probation period for my actions. And for these 6 months, I would only be paid $50 a day, and I wouldn't receive the normal $20 a day I receive for driving to the other shops. I ask if he's serious about this, and if he has seriously considered what he was doing. This is when Peter let his true color shines and tells me I'm lucky I wasn't fired for my constant disrespect towards him and the co-owner, Karen. Now, if he didn't pity me for being a struggling disabled veteran, I never once discussed my money with anyone I worked with. Peter thought I was broke and desperate, was solely based on my appearance and what I could tell. That he would have fired me long ago. Something inside me snapped and I just started laughing. He asked me what I thought was so funny, and I stood to my full height, stepped to him like a drill sergeant about to give some wall-to-wall counseling, and said, "You should consider your life choices and who you choose to go into business with." Peter then says, "What are you gonna do, sue me or something? Go ahead if you think you can afford it. What you get from this VA is like $1,000 a month. I know how bad you need this job." That wasn't my plan, but it kicked my malicious compliance in, and I'll always be a soldier ready to go to war. That day I called a labor lawyer, paid the $3,000 retainer fee, and started my lawsuit for unsafe work environments, unpaid overtime, and the 6 months of my probation for the lawyer to get off the paperwork together, and filed slow rolling on my request. And this lawyer was a former Marine, so I think he had an idea of what I had in mind. After everything was ready, my lawyer filed the paperwork, and Peter and Karen were served at the main store while I was at work. They read the paperwork, and the process server for my lawyer stuck around to be a witness to what I knew would be coming. When they read that I was suing them, Karen and Peter shouts, "I should kick your ass, you ungrateful piece of shit!" And Karen screams,
You're fucking fired, you wussy, you little cat. I bet you weren't really even in the military.
The process server recorded everything and gave it to my lawyer, who added the lawsuit unlawful termination, because it's illegal to fire an employee because they're suing you. The next day I opened my lube shop car wash combo and started recruiting my former co-workers at higher pay plus commission. They also wanted to jump in on the lawsuit, and my lawyer was more than happy to add them to it. So 2 years down the line, my subpoenas to get security footage from the shops, the books going back 5 years, and the sworn testimonies we go to a mediation to settle, they offer a measly $50K to split between the 15 of us on the lawsuit when we didn't even cover the unpaid overtime. We declined, and then our Apache came in to save the day. We sent by the IRS, delivered by my lawyer because of the request for the company's tax documents. Peter held each lube shop as its own individual LLC, each with its own tax ID and employment record. Karen and Peter thought it was a smart move to file for a tax credit for employing a veteran at each of the 6 shops. In their filing, they claimed that they employed a veteran, me, as a full-time employee, working at a minimum 36 hours a week, at a rate of $12 an hour. The government gives a tax breaks to companies that employ veterans. At the next mediation, my lawyer presented the reports to me and their lawyer, and the mediator, after a quick 20-minute discussion, Peter and Karen came back and agreed to settle at a request for $40K and unpaid overtime to split between 15 of us. All legal fees and a personal settlement for the unlawful termination of $20K for each shop. I was listed as an employee at well as unpaid wages for the 6 months. I was only paid $5 an hour. Their only demand was that we all agreed to a gag order so that nothing would leave the mediator's table. Of course, we signed that and took our paychecks. But somehow the tax paperwork made its way to just the right person at the IRS, and they decided to audit Peter and Karen, and their investigation was opened on them for tax fraud. I sold the shop and opened to the guys that came over and jumped on the lawsuit, and they each paid me $8K, and I washed my hands of it. I put my house up for sale and moved away. I did go back about 8 months later because the guy who was supposed to take care of the lawn had apparently been arrested, and the yard went a bit bad for a few months being cut before the city informed me that they were going to fine me $100 a day until it was brought to code. So I went down to mow it myself, while there I decided to check in with my realtor to see if there's anything we could do about yard maintenance. And who do I see but little old Sue sitting pretty at the front desk. Sue couldn't speak fast enough to tell me what all happened, and it was perfect. What I thought was an Apache turned out to be an atom bomb. Peter filed bankruptcy to try not to go broke after making a plea deal for probation for tax fraud and paying a ton in unpaid taxes. Karen took off with some dude she met at a casino. I asked 2 questions. If she knew who reported the fraudulent tax paperwork to the IRS, and what happened with Peter's car collection. She told me I have no idea, and to check out the parking lot behind the realtor's office before leaving. On my way out, I took a peek behind the realtor's office to see a safety green SV1 sitting there. Apparently, Peter started selling off his own cars early and cheap, hoping he would be able to buy them back after filing bankruptcy. To this day, I have no idea who, if anyone, actually turned in the paperwork to the IRS. My personal theory is, whoever it was tasked with compiling it, and all their claims noted something strange and reported it. However it happened, I couldn't have happened to anyone more deserving. Thank you for watching today's video. If you all enjoyed, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and all of that other stuff. I will see you all next time. Hasta la pasta.